It's your boy Luke, back for another NFL Showdown picks video, this time for Sunday Night Football between the Tennessee Titans and the Los Angeles Rams, which is going to be an interesting looking Titans team, obviously without Derrick Henry now. And on the other side of things, we have Matthew Stafford, who's highly questionable, so not sure whether John Wolford is going to be playing quarterback for them or Stafford as per usual, so a lot of headlines going into this game and a lot to cover in terms of a fantasy perspective. So what we'll do here in this video is we'll get you completely prepared for this single game slate. We'll talk all the injuries in play. We'll talk the game flow. Of course, our favorite stud options, our favorite value plays, and we'll wrap it up with our favorite stud options for the captain slot. So without further delay, let's hop right into it. First off with an injury report here for Sunday Night Football. In terms of fantasy relevant injuries on the Titans side of things, of course, Derrick Henry is going to be out for at least 6 weeks. He just had foot surgery. So unfortunately, this team's going to look a lot different. Very likely to rely on the pass now that they don't have Henry. Even the backup for this team, Jeremy McNichols, a little bit more of a receiving back. So we'll talk about the implications of that a little bit later on, but no Derrick Henry for this week. Julio Jones is going to be questionable with the hamstring injury, was not able to finish last game, came out a little bit early, which was disappointing to see, especially for us fantasy owners, but expected to be able to suit up. He's been struggling through that injury all year, and with Derrick Henry out, they need all decks on hand, so I expect him to be out there. On the Rams side of things, we have Matthew Stafford, who, like I mentioned before, is highly questionable with a back injury. Has not practiced to this point of the week, but in my opinion, I definitely think he's going to go out there and start. We're going to get to the game flow here in a second, but the Rams are still heavy favorites, and they would not be heavy favorites if Vegas thought that Stafford was going to be sitting. So for me, I still have him projected as in, but as always with these injury situations, is something we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially going up until lock. So this is probably a good time to plug this. On Sunday, we're going to have an update to all these projections, of course, on my Patreon page. So if he ends up being rolled out, if John Wolford ends up starting, if you guys are looking for those projections, make sure to check that out on there. I obviously update them with all the injuries. If we end up having no Julio Jones, no Robert Woods, who's also questionable for this game with a foot injury, of course, you guys will be able to see all the implications on there. But as of right now, all reports are that Julio will be playing. Same thing with Matthew Stafford and Robert Woods. But of course, things can change very quickly in the NFL. Now getting to a game flow, we have a 53-point over-under here, one of the higher scoring games of the entire weekend. But again, the Rams favored by 7 points. So you can see that clearly Matthew Stafford is projected as in via Vegas. If he was out, John Wolford would not have them as 7-point favorites. It'd be much closer to a field goal type of game for the Rams. But overall, I expect a competitive game here. I think a lot of people are writing off the Titans now that they don't have Derrick Henry. But the truth is, this team, when they throw the ball, especially when they have the quick passes moving, is extremely effective. They have A.J. Brown out there, Julio Jones, and before the year, a lot of people were extremely bullish about this passing offense. People were talking about it as potentially a top 5 offense through the air, let alone on the ground. So I do expect them to perform a little bit better than people expect. People are a little bit down on that injury, as they rightfully should be. I mean, Derrick Henry was in the MVP conversation before he ended up going out with that injury. But again, I expect them to rebound a little bit better than most. With all of that in mind, let's go over to our stud options for each team. So keeping in mind that we expect the Tennessee Titans to pass the ball a whole lot more, they were at a 60-40 split between rushing and passing going into this week. I expect it to reverse. I expect it to be right around a 60% pass rate, a 40% rush rate. So it's no surprise that all 3 stud options for the Titans we have are with pass catchers in our quarterback. So first off, we have Julio Jones at $7,400. I have him at 12.1% ownership right now, projected for just under 16 fantasy points. And even though he's not going to play every snap here, we do expect people like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine to get at very least shuffled in there. I mean, he's just a little bit prone to injury. They don't want to overexert Julio Jones or anything like that. He's still an explosive play threat. I mean, we saw last time on primetime, caught that ball that bounced off the defender way downfield for right around 80 yards, was robbed of a touchdown based on a penalty, and this guy still got juice. He's extremely fast. He's very good at high-pointing the ball. So again, he's a relatively good price there at $7,400. A lot of the other options on this team are a lot more expensive. like A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill, for example. Julio Jones lets you at least keep a relatively balanced lineup with the rest of your build and definitely will make my player pool. And number 2, somebody I'm a little bit more excited about, though, is A.J. Brown at $10,200. Somebody who's definitely garnering more ownership at 30.5%, but he has a much higher projection. This guy is the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team, is not dealing with any ailments anymore, was a little bit sick for a few weeks, wasn't dealing with COVID, but had a stomach bug. It was making him a little bit weaker than usual, and he still put up some nice numbers. Now that he's going to be back to full strength, back to full speed, everything like that, I expect those numbers to improve even further. And with the subtraction of Derrick Henry from this offense, Brown is going to get even more targets. They're going to have to start using the passing game as a little bit of a makeshift run game with some screen passes, some short passes, that kind of thing. And A.J. Brown, because he's so good after the catch, is going to be a prime target for those opportunities. But at number 1, we have Ryan Tannehill at $9,800. He's going to be chalk this week. Obviously, people are on this passing attack, given that Henry's out of here, but I will be as well. I think it's well warranted. He has nearly a 20-point projection. And again, even without Henry, he's still going to be productive. He's going to have more opportunity. The offense is going to rely on him a little bit more than in the past. So at $9,800, I think that's more than a fair enough price tag. You could probably have him closer to $11,000, even $12,000, and I would still have him in my pool. Just a different situation now that Henry's out of the equation, and I'll definitely have him at the captain slot and at the flex position. And now for the Rams side of things, I think we're going to see what we've seen to this point of the year. I don't expect it to change very much. With Matthew Stafford at the helm, you're going to see a relatively balanced offense. They mix in the run left and right, but of course, they're known for that passing attack. They throw a ton of passes. Short passes to Kupp are their specialty out there in LA. So first off, we'll talk about Darrell Henderson Jr. at $9,200. He's not somebody who I expect to get extra usage in this game or anything like that, but when he gets touches, this guy is effective. He's very good in terms of a per rush average. He's very good in terms of yards after contact as well. So at 16.2% ownership, I think that's well warranted. I mean, he's not like he's chalk on this slate. If he were chalk, I'd probably be fading him just because I expect this to be a higher scoring game. But at lower ownership levels, he's definitely worth a play there at a 17.2 point projection. Next up, we have Matthew Stafford, and I think people may try to avoid him just because of the injury concern. You know, they see that back issue. They see that he hasn't practiced for a few days. It's also $12,800. There might be a little bit of concern going there, but I don't think you need to be. I mean, I have him in every single lineup as of right now, 100%, either at the flex spot or the captain slot. So well warranted there at 70.7% ownership. In fact, I think you should try to get well above that. Has over a 20-point projection. Is only one of just 2 players on the slate that can go ahead and say that. But of course, our number 1 pick on this slate has an even higher projection than Matthew Stafford. It is the aforementioned Cooper Kupp at $12,400. This guy is this Los Angeles Rams offense. With Matthew Stafford, they clearly have a very good rapport, but even more so, there's tons of scripted plays for Kupp. You're seeing tons of screens thrown his way. Sean McVay is just trying to get the ball in Kupp's hands. He's very good after the catch, very explosive. I think that's probably his most underrated asset. So 38.9% ownership is just not enough. I think he should be closer to 50, even 60% owned. Somebody I'm nearly locking this week. And obviously the price tag's up there, but he's been the number 1 fantasy player in all of the NFL this year, regardless of position. That should just tell you everything you need to know about his game. He's getting a prolific amount of targets in this offense, and if he keeps it up at this pace, could very well end up having the best wide receiver season. Now for our value plays. First off, we have Tyler Higbee at $5,600. And while he's a little bit more expensive than I usually like to go for these value plays, we're kind of bereft of a lot of them. There's not many good options on this slate. So even at 26% ownership, I'm willing to go there. He's somebody who hasn't quite had the 2021 that we've expected. A lot of the production has been funneled through people like Cooper Kupp, even Van Jefferson, rather than somebody like Higbee. But I do expect that to regress at some point. Obviously, Higbee last year with Jared Goff had some very nice games, over 20 fantasy points in 3 affairs. And obviously, he's had a huge upgrade with Matthew Stafford. So the price tag is very fair here. I believe that the ownership is fair as well. But again, with so little options for value on this slate, it's definitely somebody I'm going to use as a foundational piece. Next up is Adrian Peterson at an even $3,000. And yes, that Adrian Peterson, the old guy, he's returning here for this Titans team. And while he hasn't been activated from the practice squad quite as of yet, he is expected to by game time. He's somebody who is going to get plenty of touches in his first time out here. Jeremy McNichols, like I mentioned before, he's going to be the quote-unquote #1 running back for this team, but he's a passing back. He's not very good between the tackles. He's probably somebody that they're going to stick to third down usage. I expect on first and second down, Adrian Peterson to get a bulk of the carries. If that's the case, if he's getting close to 12, 15 carries in this game, again, I still expect them to be a little bit more pass heavy, especially considering that Henry's out of there. That could be enough to pay off a $3,000 price tag. So you can see not a lot of people are going to be willing to go there at 14.5% ownership, but somebody I'm willing to be early on just because when we've seen him in the past, he's still been effective. This guy is still very athletic, still very strong, and able to get plenty of yards after contact. But at #1 for our value plays, we have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine at $2,200, going to be a little bit lower owned at 11.4%. But like I mentioned before, because Julio Jones is dealing with injury, likely to see some extra snaps here. He's been effective when he's played here in the past as well. He's a very good precision wide receiver, good at route running, and just a little bit underrated overall. So an 8.9 point projection. I really like him here in this slate, particularly if Julio Jones ends up being rolled out. So that's something that we can prepare for now. If Julio's out, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is a borderline lock play. Very good price tag there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that situation. But now for our captain plays. First off, we have A.J. Brown at $15,300. It's definitely going to see some ownership. I mean, obviously, these guys at the top of the board are always going to garner some attention at the captain slot. But for me, that's well warranted. This is clearly the #1 option on this team. And at nearly a 30-point projection, I don't think you can go wrong there. But #2, somebody with a little bit more upside, that's Ryan Tannehill. Believe it or not, a better price tag. As we outlined before, also coming in with lower ownership. But what I really like about Ryan Tannehill is the rushing upside he brings to the table, particularly with Henry out of the lineup. With Henry out of the lineup, when these guys get down into the red zone, I do expect Ryan Tannehill to get a little bit more usage, perhaps use him on options, that kind of thing, to try and get it into the end zone, because they've been very ineffective with passing in the red zone. So I do expect them to try to run the ball, and perhaps Ryan Tannehill is the one to go take it into the end zone. If he ends up doing so, could end up being the optimal captain. But at #1, our best captain, it's not particularly close. It's Cooper Kupp. Again, he has well over a 20-point projection. At the captain slot, projected for 32.3 points, which is almost unheard of. So believe it or not, that 16.5% ownership number is too low. He's somebody I'm going to have at captain in half of my lineups this week. He just has such high upside. He has such a high floor. And again, this is the #1 fantasy player in all of the NFL, even outscoring every quarterback, which is just jarring when you take a look at it that way. So Cooper Kupp, somebody I'm going to have in pretty much every lineup, whether it's at captain or at the flex spot. That is all I've got for my Sunday night football picks. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you have as your favorite captain pick on the slate. Perhaps it's somebody like Cooper Kupp. That's a very obvious player. Perhaps it's somebody off the board I wasn't considering. Go ahead and let me know. I always love to hear from you guys. And as always here on the channel, I appreciate all of your support. If you guys haven't already liked the video, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. Not only do we cover the Showdown slates, we also cover the main slate for Draftkings every week. We have golf content coming out, UFC content, pretty much something for everybody. So if you enjoyed this database content, if you enjoyed these picks, make sure to subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that in the future. But as I mentioned before, if you guys want access to all of my projections, not just the guys I was able to squeeze into this video, make sure to check out my Patreon page. A link will be in the description for that. It's just $1 for the month for my NFL projections. So you're not going to find a better deal out there in the industry. But until next time, good luck with all of your lineups this weekend, and peace.